Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're revisiting our 4-color Planeswalker deck called Superfriends, because we got a lot of new additions from the latest expansions and some of the cards in the deck got removed from the game, so we need to find some replacements for them. So the idea of the deck is still the same. We're playing a lot of Planeswalkers, basically all the Planeswalkers in these 4 colors, because we couldn't really fit in all 5 colors unfortunately. And then we're also playing with the Oath enchantments that are pretty awesome when we're playing with a lot of Planeswalkers in our deck. And then the rest of the deck is basically removal spells and sweepers, so that we can protect our Planeswalkers and ride them to victory. So let's get started with Oath of Nissa, one of the best cards in the deck, because not only does it provide some card selection by letting us look at the top 3 cards and choose a creature, land or planeswalker, but we can also spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast our planeswalker spells, so when it comes to casting planeswalkers we don't have to worry about their colors. Next up we have Elvish Visionary, a nice play in the early game since it gives us a 1/1 creature that can help protect our planeswalkers by chum blocking, and it also draws us a card so that we get closer to our more powerful spells. Then we have 1 copy of Oath of Chandra as a nice little removal spell that deals 3 damage to target creature, and then when we play a planeswalker spell at the end step, we get to deal 2 damage to each opponent, so we can also redirect that 2 damage to the opposing planeswalkers, which is a nice way to try and take them out. Then we have a Declaration in Stone as a nice and efficient removal spell that exiles the creature we're targeting, can also take out multiple tokens, and the fact that it exiles is also relevant. We are giving our opponent card advantage by giving them a clue token, but in this kind of deck with all our planeswalkers that can provide card advantage turn after turn by activating them, it doesn't really matter that we're giving our opponent a clue token, since we can bury them in the card advantage that we generate from our planeswalkers. Then we have Fork in the Road, which is our new replacement for Sylvan Ranger. Not as good as the Sylvan Ranger because we don't get a 1/1 creature that can protect our planeswalkers, but we still get the same effect of getting to look at our library for a basic and put it into our hand, and in addition we also get to look for a second basic land that we get to put into our graveyard, which would be a way to enable Delirium, for example, although we don't really have any Delirium cards in our deck, but we can still do that to put a land that we don't need into our graveyard, so that we reduce the chances of drawing a card that we don't want to draw. And next up we have our first Planeswalker in Nissa Vastwood Seer that can fetch a forest and then transforms into Nissa Sage Animist, which can provide a lot of card advantage. So we usually want to wait until we can play Nissa and play a land to transform her right away. That way we play around removal spells, but there are situations where you just need the forest and you play her out on turn 3. Next up we have Oath of Gideon, which is another legendary enchantment that puts 2 1/1 tokens into play, and our planeswalkers enter the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter, which is actually quite powerful. Then we have the new Oath of Liliana, which when it enters the battlefield, the opponent has to sacrifice a creature, and then at the beginning of the end step, if we played a planeswalker, we get a 2/2 zombie token, which is actually untapped, which is a rare thing for zombie tokens, so they can protect our newly cast planeswalker right away, which is quite nice. Then we have Anguished Unmaking as a versatile removal spell that can also take care of opposing planeswalkers and enchantments. 1 copy of Read the Bones just for some more card advantage and to smooth out our draws if we maybe need to draw into some planeswalkers or if we need to draw into some lands, then Read the Bones can help. And next up we have the new Planeswalker Liliana the Last Hope, which can shrink opposing creatures with a +1, can even kill them if they have only 1 toughness, can also provide some card advantage with the -2, and their -7 can also close out the game. Then we have a Nissa, which can make tokens, put counters on our creatures, and -7 to draw a bunch of cards and gain a bunch of life. Then we have a Woodland Wanderer, which was not in my previous build of Superfriends, but I've come around on the Woodland Wanderer. So for 4 mana we get a 2/2, but thanks to Converge, it's actually going to be a 6/6 creature most of the time, since it will enter the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it, as long as we spend 4 different colors of mana to cast the Woodland Wanderer. And it also has Trample and Vigilance, so that means that it can play offense and defense quite nicely, so it can still stay back to protect our Planeswalkers while it can still attack. And of course 6 toughness means that not a lot of removal spells will be able to kill the Woodland Wanderer. And in fact our next sweeper here, Languish, does not kill our own Woodland Wanderer, which is quite important. So this gives -4/-4 to all creatures. So this is of course against opposing creature decks, can wipe the board while keeping our Planeswalkers alive. Then we have Gideon, one of the better Planeswalkers, can make tokens with the 0 ability, turn into a 5/5 indestructible creature with the +1 and make an emblem giving our creatures +1/+1, but most of the time we'll be using the 0 and +1 abilities. We also have Nahiri with a few expensive creatures that we can search with her if we decide to ultimate. Can also +2 for some card selection and -2 to take care of problematic enchantments or tapped creatures. We have Arlinn Kord, which is not the greatest Planeswalker in this deck, but still worth running. So the 0 ability can make a 2/2 token, the +1 can give a creature +2/+2 Vigilance and Haste, and then when she transforms after using the 0 ability, we can give our creatures +1/+1 and Trample, which is not great since we don't have a ton of creatures in the deck. The -1 can deal 3 damage to a creature or player, which is quite good, and then the ultimate is also pretty powerful once we get it going. Then another 2 sweepers in Planar Outburst, which just says destroy all non-land creatures, so it doesn't matter how big the creatures are, and we can also awaken it to turn a land into a 4/4 hasty creature. We have Ob Nixilis, which is a removal spell and a card advantage engine, can also close out the game. Then we have a creature in Linvala the Preserver, which for 6 mana does a pretty good job of stabilizing the board, since we get a 5/5 flyer. If we're behind on life, we gain 5 life. If we're behind on board, we get a 3/3 Angel token. Also works very nicely with Nahiri's ultimate, since we get her into play, get the ETB effects, and then still get her back into our hand to maybe get those ETB effects once again. And same goes with Greenwarden of Murasa. When he enters the battlefield, we get to return a card from our graveyard to our hand. Same when he dies, so also synergizes nicely with Nahiri's ultimate. Then we have Chandra, which can close out games with her +1, and can also sweep the board with a -X or change our hand with a 0 ability. And then Sorin, which can also kill stuff and draws extra cards with the +1, and then the ultimate is also pretty awesome. Then our mana base, which is the complicated part. We've got 2 plains, since we want 2 fetchable white sources for our double white cards. Then 2 swamps, only 1 mountain since red is our smallest color in the deck. Then 2 forests, because we also want the extra forest for Nissa Vastwood Seer when she looks for one. We have 2 Hissing Quagmire as a creature land that turns into a Death Touch creature, so can defend our Planeswalkers from big nasty creatures. And we have Shambling Vent, which can gain us some extra life back. Then 2 Canopy Vista, which is a forest and a plains, which is important for the check lands that we're about to get to. Because we have a Woodland Cemetery, Rootbound Crag ×1, Clifftop Retreat ×1, 2 Isolated Chapel, 1 Dragonskull Summit, 2 Sunpetal Grove, and finally 4 Evolving Wilds, which is also very important to fix our mana in the deck. Alright, so that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks like a decent keep here. We've got Evolving Wilds and Fork in the Road to fix our mana. So I think Evolving Wilds can get a Plains, so this comes into play untapped. That way we have double white for Planar Outburst, and then Fork in the Road can get either black or red mana. Another option is getting either a Swamp or a Mountain with Evolving Wilds, and then casting this on turn 3 instead, which might also be reasonable. So actually I think I'm okay with playing this tapped. That way we get at least one extra draw step to inform our decision. Does mean we don't get to play this on turn 2 most likely, but it's not like we have to play Anguished Unmaking on 3. So we drew Planar Outburst, so it's still not entirely clear what we should get with the Evolving Wilds. But I'm kind of leaning towards a Mountain. Doesn't really matter if we get the Mountain with the Fork in the Road or with the Evolving Wilds, but might as well get the Mountain here. And then we can get a Swamp with Fork in the Road. And turn to Elvish Visionary from our opponent. She's gonna draw them a card. Another Fork in the Road makes it a little bit easier. So here we can just get a Swamp, and then the second Fork in the Road we can still see. And here I don't think I'll put a basic in the graveyard, since we kind of want to draw lands next turn. So let's just put this into our hand and then say finish, and then play the Swamp for our turn. And then hopefully we draw a basic or an untapped land next turn so we can play Arlinn Kord. Otherwise we're just playing another Fork in the Road. Which will probably just get a Plains so that we enable the Planar Outburst. So that's a Jiraga Auxiliary from our opponent. We can just wipe those away with Planar Outburst. Alright, Hissing Quagmire, so here we can play this tapped, play out Fork in the Road, get a Plains, and at this point I don't mind putting a basic in the graveyard, and I think we don't need another Swamp, so let's put that in the graveyard, keep the forests around in case we draw a Nissa Vastwood Seer, so at least she has a target. If our opponent plays another creature here, that would be excellent. There we go. So our opponent looks to be a green-white elf deck, which is pretty interesting, with Dwinnen pumping all the elves. So they can attack us for 5 down to 14, but Planar Outburst is gonna put a stop to that party. Another Plains is also not bad, since now we get to play Sorin next turn if we want to. Alright, so we got past the early game, which is mostly fetching the right lands, which can be a little tricky. But now that we're past that, we can start playing big Planeswalkers and Sweepers, which should be good enough to close out the game against a creature deck like this one. Llanowar Empath, giving our opponent a look at the top 2. And we draw Woodland Cemetery, which is also decent. So I think we just Sorin -2 and kill this. And then next turn we can go both Arlinn Kord and Anguished Unmaking. Seems decent. So let's take care of the Empath. Gain some life back. So land number 6 for the opponent into another Empath, which we knew about. and they are revealing another auxiliary, which is fine. So here, Woodland Wanderer is not bad. Could also -2 here, or we could plus. I think I want to plus with Sorin, so might as well do that first, so that it informs our decision. And Greenwarden is also a pretty nice draw. Nothing excellent to get back yet. But yeah, let's go ahead and play the Wanderer. Start applying some pressure, make sure we can keep up Anguished Unmaking, which looks fine. And I'm not going to use it on the Empath, but if our opponent plays a valuable creature main phase 1 or main phase 2, we can still kill it. Lifespring Druid is not really a problem, unless our opponent is stuck on 2 colors and they might have a third color they're not being able to use yet. Then the Lifespring Druid could be worth Anguished Unmaking. Alright, Jiraga Auxiliary. I think I'm just going to kill the auxiliary end of turn here, since I don't really want to Planar Outburst when we have a Wanderer in play, and this one seems like the most valuable creature. So I think we start by plussing Sorin once again. Find a Chandra, which we can cast thanks to this Clifftop Retreat, and we could just -2, which just seems like the safest play here, rather than playing Arlinn Kord or even Greenwarden. Let's just -2. Get rid of those elves and attack for 6. And I guess our opponent's almost dead. Our opponent could have something like a Tragic Arrogance to take care of one of our Planeswalkers, but they're still probably gonna die to the other one or to our land here. So Liliana Huntmaster is fine. They're still dead to our Wanderer attacking here, and especially if we also activate Chandra. So let's go ahead and plus Chandra. We should be able to activate the Quagmire here, and then still play Arlinn Kord. And then we can plus on, I guess, a land so it remains untapped. And then we can still plus Sorin. This might kill our opponent on the spot, and it did. So it doesn't show which card got revealed, but we can assume the converted mana cost was more than 2. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which only has 1 land, so we can do better. Yeah, we can still do better. Alright, we'll keep. Not ideal, but at least we have our mana fixed here. Most of them will come into play tapped. At the moment all of them do. So that's not great, and we're facing Sylvan Advocate next turn, so that's good to know about. Not that we have much in the way of removal here. Alright, Fork in the Road is a start, so let's play the Quagmire so that we can play the Fork in the Road if we draw an untapped land. Otherwise we're playing it on turn 3. We already have double black, double white, and double green. So I guess we'll just get a mountain for the Chandra here. Alright, let's do that right now. And I guess we put a swamp in the graveyard, since we want to keep a forest in the deck for Nissa, and we have plenty of white. So yeah, let's put a swamp in the graveyard, so that we don't draw that swamp. So let's see if our opponent can add some more pressure to the board besides this Sylvan Advocate. So they hit us for 2, and our opponent might also be on a slower Planeswalker type deck. Arlinn Kord is a nice addition. So here I think we play Shambling Vent since the Sunpetal Grove and Mountain come into play untapped. And I don't really want to play Nissa yet. There's the risk of drawing into the second forest so that we don't get to grab it with Nissa, but it's pretty likely that our opponent has removal for Nissa here. And it's not like Nissa can attack into the Sylvan Advocate anyways. Alright, Isolated Chapel comes into play tapped, so I think we go Mountain into Arlinn Kord and make a Wolf token. That way we should be able to use the minus on the backside here to kill the Sylvan Advocate next turn before our opponent plays land number 6. And before the Advocate gets +2/+2. So I am willing to chump block the Advocate with a Wolf token, if that means keeping our Arlinn Kord. Collective Effort is gonna have a word about it. So they're gonna put a +1/+1 counter on the Advocate. That way we can no longer kill it with our Arlinn Kord. But I think I'm still willing to chump here to protect our Arlinn Kord. And that way we can maybe use the Quagmire to block the Advocate next turn or draw into a removal spell, which is even better. So what mode do we want to use? Probably just shoot our opponent for 3. Or we could +1 to keep the backsides face up here, so that we can maybe kill another creature our opponent plays, but if they play another Advocate it's gonna get the +2/+2. So there's not a lot of creatures I think our opponent plays here that we can kill with Arlinn Kord. And we'll have Chandra next turn anyways, so I think I just like shooting our opponents. So let's play Oath of Liliana. Make our opponent sacrifice the Advocate. And then shoot our opponents for 3, so we can start making some more tokens next turn. And play a land that comes into play tapped, so might as well play the Chapel tapped here. So next turn we can go Dragonskull Summit into Chandra if we want to. So looking pretty good here, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And here we kind of get punished for not keeping our Arlinn Kord on the other side, since we could have killed the Lambolt Pacifist. But it should not be able to attack next turn, so might not be a big problem. Since here I think we just play Chandra, make 2 tokens, and attack our opponent, and then make a Wolf token afterwards to protect our Planeswalkers. Could even use the Arlinn Kord to pump up one of the elementals, but I think I want to flip the Arlinn Kord to try and take care of the Lambolt Pacifist. And giving our elemental tokens vigilance doesn't do much when they go away at the end of turn. So let's make a Wolf token. Get a zombie token from Oath of Liliana. And be in pretty good shape, since next turn we can also transform our Nissa Vastwood Seer and get some card advantage going. Evolving Wilds from our opponent means no 5-drop. The best they can do is probably something like Gideon. We do have to keep Tragic Arrogance in mind, since our opponent is playing white, and playing a 3rd Planeswalker into Tragic Arrogance could be pretty arrogant, I guess. Since I guess we can make 2 3/1 tokens, then give all our creatures +1/+1 and trample. And that's a lot of damage, but our opponent is gonna exile the Wolf token here with Declaration in Stone. So, do we want to commit this Nissa and potentially lose it or not? I think we might want to play it safe here and play around the Tragic Arrogance since we're so far ahead on board. So I think we start by playing this Oath of Nissa, taking a look at our top 3. And it's all lands, so might as well get the Quagmire here. And then we can use Arlinn Kord to either give our creatures +1/+1 and trample, which is nice with Chandra's tokens as well. Would mean our zombie can attack into the pacifist, or we can just try and kill the pacifist, which might just be better here. Oh. So let's see if this works. It does. So now I think we just activate the Shambling Vent and want to leave up green mana so we can play Visionary post-combat if we want to. Plus Chandra. So I think this is the best way to play around a Tragic Arrogance. Our opponent does get to get rid of Oath of Liliana and make us keep the Oath of Nissa, but I guess that's fine. And now I think we play the Visionary just to have a creature on defense in case of a hasty creature on the other side, but with our opponent at 1, that should not be a problem. Alright, so our opponent did not have anything with a 2 mana. And there it is, Tragic Arrogance, so glad we played around it. I guess we could have not played the Visionary, but our opponent is still gonna die to our creature lands here. Alright. Get to play our Sorin as well here. I guess we'll spin the Sorin roulette here, see what's on top, and if we can win on the spot. Nope, just a land. Alright, I guess we'll give our Elvish Visionary +2/+2 and haste. And attack. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks acceptable. We've got some early interaction, a pretty powerful creature, plus a sweeper, so all we really need is a Planeswalker, and this Evolving Wilds can probably just go fetch a mountain. The only thing we're missing is double black and double white, but we don't have any immediate need for double black or double white. We do need double white for Planar Outburst eventually, but Oath of Chandra should buy us some time. Up against Island, so here we can play a tapped Isolated Chapel since we can make the other lands come into play untapped if we want to. And now Woodland Wanderer, thanks to the mountain, is going to be a 6/6 with Converge. Blue-red. Alright, they have a Jace, which we can answer nicely with Oath of Chandra, so that's good. Elvish Visionary, also a decent draw. So here it's close between playing the Woodland Cemetery and the Forest. There's reasons to do both. I think I'll just go with the Forest and let's get rid of this Jace as soon as possible. And then next turn, according to if our opponent keeps up counterspell mana, we can either go Visionary or Woodland Wanderer. And instead it's a Fevered Visions, which is kind of a problem for this deck since we usually have a hard time emptying our hand. But Woodland Wanderer does a pretty good job of applying pressure. So hopefully they don't have 2 burn spells to take care of this. Alright, Chandra is also not bad. Do need double reds before we can cast her, but once we do, we have a nice way to apply pressure. So this could be some sort of Sphinx's Tutelage deck. Take Inventory kind of points towards that as well. But with only 2 red mana, they kind of need Lightning Axe plus Fiery Impulse or Lightning Axe plus Fiery Temper to take care of the 6/6 here, which is a bit unlikely, but you never know. So I think we do still attack here. And let's see if they have it. Or if they're gonna take 6. It's just gonna be a Disperse instead. Only temporarily takes care of the Wanderer. So let's just replay it here since it's still our best play. And hope to draw into a red mana here. Our sweepers also look pretty bad. Arlinn Kord is decent. We can make a hasty Elvish Visionary next turn. So our opponent kind of needs to take care of this Woodland Wanderer while still doing what they need to do. Pore over the pages, not as scary when there's no Sphinx's Tutelage in play, and your opponent might not have found one yet. So they're probably looking for one. Discard Galvanic Bombardment. So if they have 2 more of those, they could kill the Wanderer. And Lightning Axe plus another burn spell. Yep, there's a Fiery Temper are gonna kill the Wanderer. Alright. So that's unfortunate, but we can come back with an Elvish Visionary and Arlinn Kord. And the Greenwarden is also interesting. Can get back the Wanderer, but it's kind of slow. While if we play Arlinn Kord first, then if Arlinn Kord survives, we can play the Greenwarden next turn and give it haste, which is a lot more appealing. So I think we start by playing the Elvish Visionary here. Make sure we can still cast our Arlinn Kord. This looks about right. See what we draw. Shambling Vent, no thank you. Play Arlinn Kord, give our Visionary haste and vigilance. And their opponent can redirect the 2 damage to Arlinn Kord, and then if they have another burn spell they could kill the Arlinn Kord. But at least that's damage that's not to our face. And Oath of Chandra also triggers. So they did redirect to Arlinn. So that might mean they have another burn spell to finish her off. Another Pore over the pages, so they might have another Fiery Temper with Madness. But they still haven't found their Sphinx's Tutelage, so that's good. Another Lightning Axe discarded. So that's good for future Greenwardens. What cards do we want to draw into? Second red source is pretty high on our list. An Anguished Unmaking to take care of Fevered Visions, or now the Sphinx's Tutelage would also be great. So they did not take care of Arlinn Kord, which is good for us. So now we get to make a hasty Greenwarden of Murasa. Nahiri was also high on our list since she can take care of an enchantment. But yeah, we're not too sad here. We get to Greenwarden back the Nahiri, which is pretty great. And we get to give our Greenwarden haste and hit for a healthy amount. 2 damage is not gonna kill the Arlinn Kord. And we get to play a tapped Shambling Vent as well. So our opponent not being able to find their Sphinx's Tutelage sooner was pretty important for us here, because if they had a turn 3 Tutelage in play, we might have been almost milled out here. I guess if our opponent has a Collective Defiance, they can make us discard the Nahiri, but then they're not discarding their hand, so they're not triggering the Tutelage. So there's reasons to do both, but if you know your opponent has a Nahiri in hand, then you kind of need to take care of that. On the other hand, our opponent is basically dead on board here, so they do need to do something. And they did have the 3rd Lightning Axe, discarding an island, so we can get back a card. I think we do get back the Woodland Wanderer. Yep. Since we can give that haste next turn, if Arlinn Kord survives. 2 hit for a bunch. Oath of Jace is gonna trigger the Tutelage 3 times. So looks like they're not gonna cast a Collective Defiance, which means we either get to play Nahiri and get rid of the Sphinx's Tutelage, or we get to play the Woodland Wanderer. They are going to be able to take care of our Arlinn Kord here with this Madness Fiery Temper. So we probably don't get to kill our opponent quite yet. But at least we get to take care of the Sphinx's Tutelage, which is pretty important. So down to 25 cards. Now down to 23. It's not super likely to get milled more than twice with Sphinx's Tutelage. And we drew Dragonskull Summit, so that means we can now play Chandra. And that's gonna be game. Don't even need to attack with the Visionary, since Oath of Chandra can also close out the game here. But let's just attack with everyone. And there we go, sweet. I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.